The rain tapped against the windows of Mr. Pemberton's law office like impatient fingers. Olivia Bennett sat in the leather chair, her hands folded tightly in her lap as she tried to process what the elderly attorney had just told her. Her grandmother Grace had passed away 2 weeks ago, and the grief still felt fresh, like a wound that refused to heal. "I'm sorry, could you repeat that?" Olivia's voice trembled slightly. "There's a condition?" Mr. Pemberton adjusted his glasses and glanced down at the documents spread across his mahogany desk. "Yes, Miss Bennett. Your grandmother was quite specific in her wishes. The trust fund she established for your medical education, along with the family home in Beacon Hill, will only be released to you if you marry before your 25th birthday." Olivia felt the room spin slightly. Her 25th birthday was in 6 months. But why would Grandma Grace do this? She knew how important my independence was to me. The attorney's expression softened. "Your grandmother mentioned in her private letters that she worried about you dedicating your entire life to medicine without experiencing love. She wanted to ensure you would have someone to share your journey with." An unexpected proposal. Olivia walked out of the office in a daze, the October wind biting through her thin jacket. She had 2 choices: find someone to marry in 6 months, or give up her dream of becoming a doctor. The medical school tuition alone was crushing, and without her grandmother's support, she would have to abandon everything she had worked toward. Olivia Bennett. She turned to find a tall man standing near a sleek black car. He wore an expensive charcoal suit that fit him perfectly, and his dark hair was styled with casual precision. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, deep brown, intelligent, and somehow sad despite his composed expression. "I'm Dr. Julian Hart," he said, extending his hand. "I was a colleague of your grandmother's. She treated my father years ago at Massachusetts General Hospital." Olivia shook his hand, confused. "I don't understand. How did you know I would be here?" "Your grandmother contacted me several months ago," Julian said carefully. "She explained her plan and asked if I would consider helping you fulfill the condition of her will." Olivia's jaw dropped. "She asked you to marry me? But we've never even met." Julian's expression remained neutral, though something flickered in his eyes. "Not exactly marry you, but rather offer a practical arrangement. I'm aware this sounds unusual, but please, let me explain over coffee. You deserve to understand the full situation before making any decisions." The arrangement: they sat in a quiet corner of a nearby cafe, steam rising from their cups like ghosts between them. Julian spoke with the same careful precision Olivia imagined he used in the operating room. "I'm a cardiac surgeon at Boston Memorial," he began. "My work is my life, and I've accepted that relationships aren't part of my path. However, your grandmother saved my father's life when I was 16 years old. I owe her everything I've become." Olivia wrapped her hands around her warm cup. "So this is about repaying a debt?" "Partially," Julian admitted. "But also, I need a solution to my own problem. The hospital board has been pressuring me to settle down, to present a more stable image. They believe a married man would be a better candidate for the position of chief of surgery." "So we would both benefit," Olivia said slowly, her mind racing through the implications. Julian nodded. "The arrangement would be simple and clear. We marry to fulfill the conditions: yours for the inheritance, mine for professional advancement. We maintain separate lives, separate bedrooms. After 2 years, we divorce quietly and amicably. You'll have your medical education secured, and I'll have my position established." Olivia studied his face, looking for any sign of deception or hidden motives. All she saw was a man who seemed as trapped by circumstances as she was. Why would my grandmother think this was a good idea? This isn't love, it's a business transaction. For the first time, Julian's expression softened slightly. "Your grandmother told me something before she passed. She said sometimes the heart needs permission to feel, and sometimes that permission comes in unexpected forms." I didn't understand what she meant then. Wedding day 3 weeks later, Olivia stood in the Boston City Hall, wearing a simple cream-colored dress she had bought the day before. Rebecca, her best friend, stood beside her as a witness, still shaking her head in disbelief. "It's not too late to run," Rebecca whispered. "I have my car right outside." But Olivia's eyes were fixed on Julian, who stood near the judge's desk in a perfectly tailored navy suit. He looked calm and composed, as if this were just another procedure to complete. Yet when his eyes met hers, and she saw something unexpected, a flash of nervousness that made him seem more human. The ceremony was brief and impersonal. The judge read the standard vows, and both Olivia and Julian responded with clear, steady voices. When it came time to exchange rings, Julian slipped a simple platinum band onto her finger, with hands that were surprisingly gentle. "You may kiss the bride," the judge announced. Julian leaned forward and pressed a chaste kiss to Olivia's cheek. So quick and formal that it might have been a handshake. But in that brief moment of contact, Olivia felt her heart skip in a way that had nothing to do with medical conditions. Moving in Julian's townhouse in Beacon Hill was everything Olivia had expected from a successful surgeon: elegant, historic, and immaculately maintained. The brick building dated back to the 1800s, with tall windows and a private courtyard garden that somehow survived in the heart of the city. Nina, the housekeeper, greeted them warmly at the door. She was a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a knowing smile that made Olivia feel like she could see right through their arrangement. "Your room is on the 3rd floor, Mrs. Hart," Nina said, and Olivia flinched slightly at the unfamiliar name. "Dr. Hart's bedroom is on the 2nd floor. You'll have complete privacy." Julian carried Olivia's single suitcase upstairs himself, despite her protests. The 3rd-floor bedroom was beautiful: hardwood floors, a 4-poster bed, and large windows overlooking the garden. It was also as far from Julian's room as possible, while still being in the same house. "I hope you'll be comfortable here," Julian said, setting down her suitcase. "Nina has prepared dinner for 7 o'clock if you'd like to join me. If not, she can bring something to your room." Olivia turned to face him, suddenly aware of how strange this all was. They were married, living in the same house, yet they were still strangers. "Julian, can I ask you something? Of course, have you ever been in love?" The question hung in the air between them. Julian's expression became carefully blank, the same professional mask he had worn since they met. "Once," he said quietly. "A long time ago. It didn't end well." He left before Olivia could ask anything more, his footsteps echoing down the wooden stairs. She sat on the edge of her new bed, looking at the ring on her finger, and wondered what secrets Julian Hart was hiding behind his perfectly controlled exterior. What she didn't know was that downstairs, Julian stood with his hand pressed against the wall, his heart racing in a way it hadn't in years. He had told himself this arrangement would be simple and emotionless. But when he had slipped that ring onto Olivia's finger and seen the vulnerability in her green eyes, something inside him had cracked open. This was supposed to be a practical solution. So why did it suddenly feel like the most complicated thing he had ever done? Olivia woke to the sound of footsteps on the floor below. She checked her phone. 5:30 in the morning. Through the old walls of the townhouse, she could hear the faint sound of running water and the beep of a coffee maker. Apparently, Dr. Julian Hart was an early riser. She pulled on her robe and ventured downstairs, drawn by the smell of fresh coffee. The kitchen was empty, but a full pot sat waiting. And through the window, she could see Julian in the small courtyard garden. He wore running clothes and was stretching methodically, his movements precise and controlled, even in this simple routine. Olivia poured herself coffee and watched him without meaning to. There was something almost lonely about the way he moved through his morning ritual, as if he had done it alone for so long that it had become armor against the world. When Julian came back inside, he stopped short at seeing her in the kitchen. "Good morning." "I didn't expect you to be awake this early. Medical student schedule," Olivia said with a small smile. "Early rounds start at 6. Something shifted in Julian's expression, a flicker of understanding, maybe even respect. "Right. You start your clinical rotations this week? At Boston Memorial, actually?" Olivia took a sip of her coffee, surprised that he remembered. "In the cardiology department." Julian's eyebrows rose slightly. "That's my department." I should have made the connection. He poured his own coffee, and for a moment they stood in companionable silence. "If you need anything, any guidance or support, let me know." "Thank you, but I want to earn my place on my own merit," Olivia said firmly. "I don't want anyone thinking I'm getting special treatment because of our ... arrangement." "Fair enough." Leah nodded approvingly. "Though I doubt anyone will think that once they see you work. Your grandmother always said you had natural healing hands. Olivia felt warmth spread through her chest. She talked about me? Constantly, Julian said, and for the first time, his smile reached his eyes. She was incredibly proud of you. She used to say that you reminded her of herself when she was young. Brilliant, stubborn, and too kind for your own good. Unexpected connections, the first week of living together, established a pattern. They were like two planets in separate orbits, occasionally crossing paths, but never colliding. Julian left for the hospital at 6 each morning and often didn't return until late evening. Olivia maintained her own schedule of classes and study sessions, trying not to think about the strange man who was technically her husband. But small moments kept breaking through the careful distance they maintained. One evening, Olivia came home exhausted from a particularly difficult day of rounds. She had witnessed her first patient death, an elderly man whose heart had simply given out, despite everyone's best efforts. She dropped her bag in the hallway and sank onto the stairs, tears streaming down her face before she could stop them. Olivia? She looked up to find Julian standing at the top of the stairs, concern etched across his usually composed features. He came down slowly and sat beside her, not touching but close enough that she could feel his presence. What happened? His voice was gentle, stripped of its usual professional tone. Through her tears, Olivia explained about Mr. Patterson, about how she had held his hand in those final moments, about how helpless she had felt despite all her training and knowledge. Julian listened without interrupting. When she finished, he spoke quietly. The first one is always the hardest. I remember mine. I was in my 3rd year of residency, a young mother with an aortic dissection. We did everything right, but sometimes the body just decides it's time to stop fighting. How do you keep going? Olivia asked, wiping her eyes. How do you face that day after day? You remember why you started, Julian said, looking at his hands, those steady surgeon's hands that had saved countless lives. And you remember that for every patient we lose, there are dozens we save. The grief means you still care, and that's what makes you a good doctor. Ow! Olivia met his eyes and saw something unexpected, shared understanding, common ground. In that moment, he wasn't Dr. Julian Hart, the brilliant cardiac surgeon. He was just someone who understood her pain. Thank you, she whispered. Julian stood and offered his hand to help her up. Come on, Nina. Left dinner warming in the oven. You should eat something. The library discovered late one night. Olivia couldn't sleep. The townhouse was old and full of sounds, creaking floorboards, settling walls, the whisper of wind through ancient window panes. She wandered downstairs in her pajamas and discovered a light coming from beneath the library door. She knocked softly. Julian. Come in. The library was a beautiful room lined with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. Julian sat in a leather armchair near the fireplace, a book open in his lap, reading glasses perched on his nose. He looked different like this, more relaxed, more human. Couldn't sleep? He asked, marking his page. Too much on my mind. Olivia gestured to the bookshelves. May I? Of course. The medical texts are on the left, literature on the right, and everything else in between. Olivia browsed the shelves, running her fingers along the spines. She found everything from advanced cardiac surgery textbooks to collections of poetry. This is quite a collection. I didn't know you read fiction. There's a lot you don't know about me, Julian said, but there was no edge to his words. Just as I don't know much about you. Olivia pulled out a worn copy of Pride and Prejudice and held it up. This is my favorite. Mine too. Julian's expression softened. My mother used to read it to me when I was young. I found her copy after she passed away and couldn't bring myself to replace it with a newer edition. Olivia sat in the armchair opposite him. I'm sorry about your mother. When did she die? 10 years ago? Heart failure. Julian removed his reading glasses and rubbed his eyes tiredly. Ironic, isn't it? I became a cardiac surgeon to save hearts, but I couldn't save hers. Is that why you're so distant? The question slipped out before Olivia could stop it. Because you're afraid of losing someone else? Julian was quiet for a long moment. Perhaps, or perhaps I'm just not built for emotional connection. Some people aren't. I don't believe that, Olivia said softly. I think you're just afraid to try. Their eyes met across the firelight, and something unspoken passed between them. Julian looked away first, standing abruptly. "It's late. We should both try to get some sleep." But as Olivia walked past him toward the door, he caught her hand gently. "Olivia, thank you. For listening, for understanding. It's been a long time since anyone tried to see past the surgeon to the person underneath." Olivia squeezed his hand briefly before letting go. "Good night, Julian." The emergency 2 weeks later, everything changed. Olivia was studying in the library when her phone buzzed with an emergency alert from the hospital. "Major accident on the highway, multiple casualties incoming, all hands needed." She grabbed her things and ran out, not bothering to leave a note. Julian was in surgery anyway. He wouldn't notice she was gone. The emergency room was chaos. Olivia worked alongside residents and attending physicians, doing everything from taking vital signs to assisting with minor procedures. Hours blurred together until someone grabbed her arm. "Dr. Hart needs you in OR3. Now." Olivia's heart jumped. She scrubbed in quickly and entered the operating room to find Julian working on a teenage boy with severe chest trauma. Blood covered the surgical drapes, and the monitors beeped frantically. "Olivia, I need you to maintain pressure here while I repair the left ventricle," Julian said without looking up. His voice was steady, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. She stepped up to the table, following his instructions precisely. For the next 40 minutes, she watched Julian work with incredible skill, his hands steady even as the boy's heart tried to give out twice. Finally, the monitor stabilized. "He's going to make it," Julian said quietly, stepping back from the table. "Good work, everyone." Outside the OR, as they both pulled off their surgical caps, Julian turned to Olivia. His face was pale, exhaustion evident in every line. "You were good in there," he said, calm under pressure. "Your grandmother would be proud." "You saved that boy's life," Olivia said, still awed by what she had witnessed. "We saved him," Julian corrected. "Medicine is never a solo performance." He swayed slightly, and Olivia instinctively reached out to steady him.
"Oh."
"When was the last time you ate?" she asked, recognizing the signs of exhaustion and low blood sugar. "Yesterday morning, I think." "Julian, that's over 30 hours ago." Olivia took his arm firmly. "Come on. We're getting food right now." They ended up in the hospital cafeteria at 3 in the morning, eating mediocre sandwiches and drinking terrible coffee. But somehow, in that fluorescent-lit space, with the adrenaline of the surgery still humming through their veins, they talked more honestly than they had since getting married. Julian told her about the pressure of being chief of surgery candidate, about the politics and expectations that came with the position. Olivia shared her fears about matching into a good residency program, about following in her grandmother's footsteps. "You know," Julian said, studying her across the table, "this arrangement was supposed to be simple, but you're making it complicated." Olivia's heart skipped. "Is that a bad thing?" Julian was quiet for a long moment. "I'm not sure yet, but I'm beginning to think your grandmother knew exactly what she was doing." The announcement came on a Tuesday morning. Dr. Vincent Clark, the hospital director and Julian's longtime mentor, called him into his office with news that would change everything. "The Morrison Foundation has approved your proposal," Dr. Clark said, his eyes bright with excitement. "They're funding the revolutionary valve replacement procedure. You'll be performing it live at the International Cardiac Surgery Conference next month." Julian felt his pulse quicken, something that rarely happened anymore. This was the opportunity he had been working toward for 5 years. A new, minimally invasive technique that could revolutionize how heart valve diseases were treated. Success would cement his reputation as one of the leading cardiac surgeons in the country. "When?" he asked. "December 15th. The conference is in New York, and you'll have the full support of the foundation. This is your chance, Julian. The position of chief of surgery is practically yours if you succeed." Julian should have felt pure triumph. Instead, he felt a strange twist in his chest when he realized the date. December 15th was the same day as Olivia's final medical school examinations. The tests that would determine her entire future. "Congratulations, my friend," Dr. Clark said, shaking his hand warmly. "This is what you've been working for." Julian left the office with his mind spinning. He should tell Olivia immediately, share this news with his wife. But something held him back. Over the past 2 months, their carefully maintained distance had eroded in ways neither of them acknowledged. They had dinner together most evenings now. They studied in the library side by side. Sometimes Olivia would fall asleep on the couch while reviewing case files, and Julian would carry her upstairs without waking her. It was still supposed to be an arrangement. So why did it feel like so much more? The growing distance as the surgery date approached, Julian threw himself into preparation with obsessive focus. He spent 18-hour days at the hospital, practicing the procedure on simulation models, reviewing every possible complication, planning for every contingency. Olivia noticed the change immediately. Their dinners became rare. The library sessions stopped. Sometimes Julian wouldn't come home at all, sleeping in his office instead. When she did see him, he looked exhausted, his eyes hollow with stress and determination. "You're pushing yourself too hard," she said one evening when he finally came home at midnight. "You need to rest." "I can't afford to rest," Julian replied, his voice sharp with tension. "This surgery will define my entire career. I can't make mistakes." "You're human, Julian. Everyone makes mistakes. Not in the operating room." He poured himself a glass of whiskey, his hand shaking slightly. "Not when someone's life depends on me being perfect." Olivia watched him, concern nodding in her stomach. She recognized the signs of burnout, of someone driving themselves toward a breaking point. But before she could say more, Julian's phone rang. "I have to take this," he said, walking away mid-conversation. That night, Olivia lay in bed, unable to sleep. She realized with startling clarity that her feelings had changed. This wasn't supposed to be real, but somewhere between late-night conversations and shared medical emergencies, she had fallen in love with her husband, and he was too. Focused on his career to even notice, finals week Olivia's final examinations began on December 10th. 5 days of intensive testing that would determine whether she graduated with honors, whether she would match into a top residency program, whether all her years of sacrifice would pay off. But she couldn't focus. Her mind kept drifting to Julian, to the way he had looked when he finally told her about the surgery, excited but distant, as if he had already left her behind. "You okay?" Rebecca asked during a study break. They were in the medical school library, surrounded by textbooks and empty coffee cups. "I'm fine," Olivia lied. "You're in love with him?" It wasn't a question. Olivia's hands stilled on her notes. "It doesn't matter. This was always supposed to be temporary." "Hey. Does he know how you feel?" "No, and I'm not going to tell him." Olivia forced herself to focus on the anatomy diagram in front of her. He made it clear from the beginning what this was. "I'm not going to make it awkward by developing feelings he doesn't share." Prekka gave her a knowing look. "Are you sure he doesn't share them?" The collapse December 14th started like any other exam day. Olivia had been studying for 72 hours straight, surviving on coffee and determination. She had one final examination left, comprehensive clinical assessment that would determine her final standing. But when she stood up from her desk that morning, the room spun violently. She caught herself on the doorframe, her vision tunneling to black at the edges. "Just stress," she muttered, splashing cold water on her face. "You can do this." She made it to the hospital for her clinical exam, where she would be tested on her ability to diagnose and treat a simulated patient. But halfway through explaining her differential diagnosis, her words started slurring. The attending physician looked at her with concern. "Miss Bennett, are you feeling all right?" "I'm fine. I just need—" The floor came up to meet her. The last thing she heard before darkness claimed her was someone calling for a doctor. The choice Julian was in the final preparation, meeting for his surgery when his phone rang. He almost ignored it. He was supposed to fly to New York in 2 hours, and every minute of preparation was crucial. But something made him answer. "Dr. Hart, this is Dr. Patterson from Boston Memorial. Your wife has been admitted to the emergency room." She collapsed during her final examination. The world stopped. Julian's carefully controlled composure shattered like glass. "What happened? What's her condition?" "Severe dehydration, exhaustion, possible stress-induced cardiac arrhythmia. We're running tests now, but she's stable. However, she's asking for you." Julian looked at Dr. Clark, at the surgical team waiting for final instructions, at the opportunity he had spent 5 years building toward. Then he thought about Olivia, her smile when they shared late-night tea, the way she challenged him to be more than just a surgeon, the warmth she had brought into his carefully controlled life. The choice was impossibly simple. "Cancel the surgery," Julian said. The room fell silent. Dr. Clark's face went pale. "Julian, you can't be serious. This is your career, your reputation, everything you've worked for." I said cancel it. Julian was already grabbing his coat. "Find someone else to do the procedure. I'm going to my wife." He ran from the conference room, ignoring the shocked voices calling after him. His hands shook as he drove to the hospital, not from fear of ruining his career, from the terrifying realization of how much Olivia meant to him. The truth revealed. Olivia woke to find Julian sitting beside her hospital bed, still wearing his surgical scrubs, his hair disheveled and his eyes red-rimmed with exhaustion and emotion. "Julian?" Her voice came out hoarse. "What are you doing here?" "Your surgery is being performed by someone else," he said quietly. I canceled. Olivia struggled to sit up, confusion and horror warring in her expression. No, you can't have done that. That surgery was everything to you. You're wrong." Julian took her hand gently, and she saw something in his eyes she had never seen before, vulnerability. Fear and love so deep it took her breath away. "You're everything to me." Tears spilled down Olivia's cheeks. "But your career, your reputation, the chief of surgery position means nothing if I lose you." Julian's voice cracked slightly. "These past 2 months, I've been lying to myself, pretending this was still just an arrangement. But the truth is, I fell in love with you. Somewhere between late-night library talks and watching you hold dying patients' hands with such compassion, I fell completely, irrevocably in love with my wife." "I love you too," Olivia whispered. "I've been so afraid to tell you, afraid you'd think I was trying to make this into something it wasn't supposed to be." Julian leaned forward and kissed her softly, tenderly, nothing like the brief, formal kiss at their wedding. This kiss was full of promise, of new beginnings, of a love neither of them had planned for but both desperately needed. When they pulled apart, Olivia touched his face gently. "What about your surgery?" "Your career will survive," Julian said firmly. "There will be other surgeries, other opportunities, but there's only one you, and I almost lost you because I was too focused on my career to see what was right in front of me. I won't make that mistake again. Your grandmother knew," he continued, a smile breaking through his serious expression. "She told me that sometimes the heart needs permission to feel. This arrangement, this marriage, it gave both of us permission to love again." Olivia laughed through her tears. She was a very wise woman. She was. Julian kissed her forehead. "Now rest. Doctor's orders. And when you're better, we're going to do this marriage properly. Real dates, real romance, real forever." "Real forever," Olivia agreed, squeezing his hand. "I like the sound of that." Epilogue. 6 months later, the sun streamed through the windows of their bedroom. No longer separate rooms, but one shared space filled with both of their books, clothes, and dreams. Olivia woke to find Julian already awake, watching her with that soft expression he reserved only for her. "Good morning, Dr. Bennett Hart," he murmured. Pulling her close, Olivia had passed her finals with honors despite her collapse, and matched into the cardiac surgery residency at Boston Memorial, where she would be working alongside her husband. Julian had eventually performed his revolutionary procedure 3 months later, to great acclaim, and had been offered the chief of surgery position. But he had negotiated for reduced hours, determined to maintain balance between his career and his marriage. "Have I told you today that I love you?" Julian asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Not yet," Olivia said with a smile. "But you have all day to make up for it." As they lay together in the morning light, both of them thought about Grace Whitfield, the wise woman who had orchestrated their unlikely meeting. She had known something they hadn't, that sometimes the best love stories begin with the most unexpected arrangements, and that 2 broken hearts can heal each other if given the chance. Their marriage had started as a contract, a practical solution to separate problems, but it had become something neither of them had dared to hope for, a real, deep. Transformative love that would last forever. And it all began the day a doctor shocked everyone by canceling the surgery of a lifetime. Choosing love over ambition and proving that sometimes the most important heart to heal is your own.